I never thought I'd be the kind of guy who'd suspect his wife of cheating. We've been married for 12 years, and up until recently, I would have bet my life on the strength of our relationship. Olivia and I have had our share of ups and downs like any other couple, but we always seem to come out stronger on the other side. We've got 2 great kids, a decent house, and what I thought was a solid marriage. But lately, something hasn't felt right. It's like a dark cloud has settled over everything, and I can't shake the feeling that something is off. It all started a few weeks ago, a small thing really, but it stuck with me. Olivia's phone buzzed late one night while we were watching TV. Nothing unusual there, she's always getting messages from friends or work. But this time, when she picked up her phone, her face changed. It was just for a split second, a flash of something, nervousness, maybe, before she smiled and turned the phone face down on the couch. I didn't think much of it at first. Why would I? But as the days passed, I kept replaying that moment in my mind. Then, I started noticing other things. She's been more distant lately, not just emotionally but physically too. She used to lean on me when we watched movies together, her head resting on my shoulder, our fingers intertwined. But now, she sits with her legs tucked under her, her body angled away from me. She's been spending more time on her phone, too, always quick to put it away when I walk into the room. Our conversations have become shorter, more superficial. It feels like we're just going through the motions, like we're living in the same house but in different worlds. The sex, well, that's been practically non-existent. It used to be regular, passionate, but now it's rare and feels more like an obligation than anything else. I've tried to brush it off, telling myself that maybe she's just stressed with work or tired from taking care of the kids. But deep down, I know that's not it. I can feel the distance growing between us, and it's starting to eat away at me. Last Friday, things took a turn for the worse. Olivia mentioned that she was going out with some friends after work. It wasn't unusual for her to have a girls' night out now and then, so I didn't think much of it. But when she came home, something was different. She was in a great mood, almost giddy, which isn't like her at all after a night out. Usually, she's just tired and ready to crash. But that night, she practically floated into the house, her cheeks flushed, a faint smile playing on her lips. I asked her how her night was, and she just said, "Oh, it was fine, nothing special," before heading to the bathroom. When she came to bed, she smelled different, not like her usual perfume, but something new, something I didn't recognize. I asked her about it, and she brushed it off, saying she had tried a new fragrance one of her friends had brought along. I wanted to believe her, but there was a nagging doubt in the back of my mind. Why would she lie about something like that? The next morning, I woke up early, my mind still racing with doubts. I decided to do something I'd never done before. I went through her phone. I know it was wrong, and I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know if there was something to my suspicions or if I was just being paranoid. But when I unlocked her phone, I found nothing. Her messages were all normal, nothing suspicious at all. It should have made me feel better, but it didn't. In fact, it made me feel worse, like I was missing something right in front of my eyes. Over the next few days, I tried to put it out of my mind, but the doubt kept creeping back in. Olivia was still distant, still spending more time on her phone, still avoiding any real connection with me. I started paying more attention to the little things, how she would quickly lock her phone when I walked into the room, how she seemed to have a lot more work dinners than usual, and how she would occasionally slip out of the room to take a call, always with the excuse that it was just work. Last night was the final straw. She had another one of those work dinners, and I decided to wait up for her. She came home late, her hair slightly tousled, and her cheeks flushed again. She tried to sneak into the bedroom quietly, probably thinking I was asleep, but I was wide awake. I asked her how the dinner was, and she gave me the same vague answer she's been giving for weeks. It was fine, nothing special. But this time, I couldn't let it go. "Who were you with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just the usual crowd," she said without looking at me, busying herself with getting undressed. "Anyone new?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. She paused, just for a second, before shaking her head. No, just the same people as always. I wanted to believe her, I really did. But something about the way she said it, the way she avoided looking at me, made my doubts flare up even more. I could feel the tension building between us, a thick, heavy silence that neither of us dared to break. This morning, I woke up feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing whether to take a step back or leap into the unknown. I don't have any solid proof that Olivia is cheating on me, just this gnawing feeling in my gut that something is very wrong. I can't confront her without evidence, but I can't keep living like this either, drowning in doubt and suspicion. I keep telling myself that I'm just being paranoid, that I'm reading too much into things, but I can't shake the feeling that my life is about to change in a way I'm not ready for. I don't know what to do, but I know I can't go on like this for much longer. Something has to give, and soon. As I sit here, writing this down, I realize that I'm at a crossroads. I can either keep pretending that everything is fine and hope that this storm passes, or I can start digging for the truth, no matter how much it hurts. I don't want to lose Olivia, but I can't live in this state of uncertainty and fear. One way or another, I need to know what's really going on. And I need to know soon. The tension between Olivia and me had been gnawing at my sanity. Every day felt like I was walking through a minefield, uncertain when the next explosion would come. I couldn't focus on anything, work, the kids, or even simple tasks around the house. My mind was consumed with thoughts of what she might be hiding from me. The little signs were there, taunting me, making me feel like I was losing my grip on reality. This morning, after she left for another work meeting, I found myself pacing around the house, unable to settle. The kids were at school, and I had the house to myself, but I couldn't shake the sense of impending doom. My mind kept going back to the previous night when she came home late again, smelling of a perfume I didn't recognize. I had asked her about it, and she gave me the same tired excuse about trying a new scent at work. But there was something about the way she said it, the way she avoided my eyes, that made me doubt her even more. As I walked into our bedroom, something caught my eye on her dresser, a small piece of paper sticking out from under her jewelry box. I hesitated, feeling a pit form in my stomach. This was wrong. I shouldn't be snooping through her things, but the curiosity was overwhelming. I picked up the paper, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. It was a receipt, from a hotel. My heart stopped for a moment, the world narrowing down to just that small piece of paper in my hand. The receipt was from 2 nights ago, during one of her work meetings. The time stamped on it was late, well after she should have been home. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I processed what this meant. I knew this wasn't just a casual night out with friends. Something was very wrong. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but this was the proof I'd been dreading. There was no logical explanation for why she would have a hotel receipt unless she was hiding something, hiding someone. My chest tightened with anger and fear, a storm of emotions I could barely control. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Without thinking, I grabbed my jacket and the receipt and headed out the door. The hotel wasn't far, just a short drive from our house. As I drove, my mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was she meeting someone there? Was this a regular thing? The questions clawed at my sanity, making me grip the steering wheel tighter until my knuckles turned white. When I arrived at the hotel, I parked my car in a daze, barely aware of my surroundings. I couldn't believe I was doing this. I felt like I was outside my own body, watching myself go through the motions. The lobby was quiet, almost serene, a stark contrast to the chaos in my mind. I walked up to the reception desk, trying to keep my voice steady as I spoke. "Hi, I'm really sorry, but I think I lost my key. I was here a couple of nights ago. Can you help me out?" The receptionist, a young woman with a kind smile, nodded and asked for my details. I gave her Olivia's name and the room number on the receipt. She typed into her computer, her fingers moving quickly over the keys. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the anticipation building as she searched the records. "Here you go," she said, handing me a new key card with a polite smile. "Room 214. I thanked her, trying to keep the panic out of my voice, and made my way to the elevator. As I ascended to the second floor, I could feel the walls closing in on me. This was it. I was about to uncover the truth, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But there was no turning back now. I had to know. The hallway was empty as I walked toward room 214, the sound of my footsteps echoing off the walls. My hands were shaking as I slid the key card into the door. For a moment, I hesitated, my mind screaming at me to stop, to walk away before I shattered everything. But I couldn't. I had to see it with my own eyes. The door clicked open, and I stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and then I saw them, Olivia and a man I didn't recognize. They were on the bed, tangled together, her moans filling the room. It felt like time slowed down, the scene in front of me burning itself into my memory in excruciating detail. I could hardly breathe as the shock set in, my world crashing down around me. This was the proof I never wanted to find. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, was betraying me in the worst possible way. My heart pounded in my chest, the pain unbearable, as anger took over. I couldn't control it, couldn't stop myself from reacting. "What the fuck?" I roared, my voice a mix of fury and agony. They both froze, their heads snapping toward me. Olivia's eyes went wide with shock, and she scrambled off the bed, trying to cover herself with the sheets. The man, tall, muscular, with a smug look on his face, stood up, seemingly unfazed by my presence. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice dripping with arrogance. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rage inside me was too intense, too overpowering. I lunged at him, fists clenched, and swung with all my might. My fist connected with his jaw, the impact sending him stumbling backward. The sound of bone hitting bone echoed in the small room, and the pain in my knuckles barely registered. "Get the fuck out of here!" Olivia screamed, her voice panicked, as she tried to pull me away. But I was beyond reason, beyond caring about anything other than making this asshole pay for what he'd done. I hit him again, and again, each blow fueled by the betrayal I felt. He tried to fight back, landing a punch to my side, but I barely felt it. My vision was red with anger, and all I wanted was to make him suffer. I grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground and slamming him into the wall. His head hit the plaster with a sickening thud, and he groaned in pain, his cocky demeanor gone. Olivia was screaming at me to stop, her voice frantic, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop. Not until I made him pay. "Please, stop. You're going to kill him," she cried, pulling at my arms. Her voice finally broke through the haze of rage, and I released my grip on him, letting him slide to the floor in a heap. He was barely conscious, his face a bloody mess, as he moaned in pain. I stepped back, breathing hard, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. Olivia rushed to his side, her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she shouted, her voice trembling. I stared at her, feeling the last remnants of my world crumble. "What's wrong with me?" I echoed, my voice hollow. "What the fuck is wrong with you, Olivia? How could you do this?" She didn't answer, just sat there, holding the man I'd just beaten, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and something else, guilt, maybe? Regret? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, had been a lie. I backed away, my mind spinning as I tried to process what had just happened. The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing in from all sides. I needed to get out of there, needed to escape before I completely lost it. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the room, the sound of Olivia's sobs echoing behind me. As I stumbled down the hallway, I felt numb, the reality of what I had just seen slowly sinking in. The woman I had loved for over a decade had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and there was no going back from this. I made my way out of the hotel and to my car, my hands still shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Once inside, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, my mind a whirlwind of emotions: anger, pain, betrayal. I didn't know what to do, where to go, or how to even begin processing what had just happened. All I knew was that my life would never be the same again. I didn't drive away from the hotel immediately. I couldn't. I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. The image of Olivia in bed with that man kept replaying in my mind, a twisted loop that I couldn't escape. I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls of the car were closing in on me, trapping me with my own thoughts. Eventually, I started the engine and drove home on autopilot. I don't even remember the drive. My mind was a blur of anger, pain, and disbelief. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always did: calm, quiet, deceptively normal. But everything had changed. I knew that the moment I stepped through that door, nothing would ever be the same. Inside, the house was eerily silent. I walked through the hallway, past the photos of our family hanging on the walls. Happy memories, now tainted by the betrayal that had shattered everything. I went straight to the living room and sat down on the couch, my body heavy with exhaustion. My mind raced with a million questions, but one stood out above all the rest: why? It wasn't long before I heard the front door open and close softly. Olivia had followed me home. I didn't look up as she entered the room. I couldn't bring myself to look at her. I just stared at the floor, waiting for her to say something, anything, that might make sense of the chaos in my head. "David," her voice was barely a whisper, thick with emotion. I could hear the tremble in it, could sense her fear and regret, but it only fueled the anger simmering inside me. "David, please, we need to talk." "Talk?" I said, my voice low and cold. "Now you want to talk? After everything?" She stood there, a few feet away from me, hesitant to come closer. "I know what you saw." "You know what I saw?" I interrupted, finally looking up at her. The sight of her standing there, her face pale and eyes red-rimmed from crying, made me feel sick. "I saw my wife, the mother of my children, fucking some stranger in a hotel room." "Is that what you mean?" Olivia flinched at my words, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry, David." Sorry?" I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "You're sorry? That's what you have to say? After everything, all you can say is you're sorry?" She took a step toward me, reaching out as if to touch me, but I recoiled, the thought of her hands on me now repulsive. "Don't," I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "Don't you fucking touch me." "David, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but you have to let me explain." "Explain what, Olivia?" I shot back, standing up from the couch so I could look her in the eyes. "What could you possibly say that would make any of this okay? That would make me understand why you betrayed me like this?" She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For a moment, she just stood there, her shoulders slumping in defeat, as if the weight of what she had done was finally sinking in. She looked so small, so fragile, and a part of me hated her for it. Hated her for making me feel like I was the one who had to be strong, when all I wanted to do was crumble. "I never meant for it to happen," she finally said, her voice trembling. It just happened." "Bullshit," I spat, anger flaring up inside me once again. "You don't just accidentally end up in a hotel room with some guy. You made a choice, Olivia. You chose to betray me, to betray our family." She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was lonely, David. You've been so distant, so caught up in work and the kids. I felt like you didn't even see me anymore. So this is my fault?" I asked incredulously. "You're blaming me for this?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," she insisted, taking another step toward me. "I know I'm the one who messed up, but you have to understand. I don't have to understand shit, I snapped, cutting her off. You cheated on me, Olivia. You destroyed everything we had. How the hell am I supposed to understand that? She flinched again, her tears flowing freely now. I never wanted to hurt you, David. I swear, I didn't. I just felt so alone. Alone? The word echoed in my mind, a cruel twist of the knife she had already plunged into my heart. We've been married for 12 years, Olivia. We've built a life together, a family. And you throw it all away because you felt a little lonely? It wasn't just that, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't thinking straight. I was confused. Confused? I repeated, disbelief coloring my tone. You were confused? That's your excuse? It's not an excuse, she said, her voice desperate. I'm not trying to make excuses. I just want you to know that it didn't mean anything. I didn't feel anything for him. It was just a mistake. A mistake, I echoed, shaking my head in disbelief. Is that what you're going to tell our kids? That mommy made a mistake? That's supposed to make everything better? She didn't have an answer for that. She just stood there, crying, her shoulders shaking with the force of her sobs. Part of me wanted to reach out, to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I couldn't. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. I turned away from her, running my hands through my hair in frustration. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she had caused me. But I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, seething with anger and heartbreak. What do you want me to say, Olivia? I finally asked, my voice flat. What do you expect me to do now? I don't know, she whispered, her voice small. I don't know, David. I just want a chance to make things right. Make things right? I scoffed, shaking my head. How do you expect to do that? Do you really think we can just go back to the way things were? She didn't answer. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating. I could feel the weight of her gaze on me, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her eyes. I didn't want to see the pain there, the regret, because I knew that deep down, it wouldn't change anything. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can forgive you. Please, she begged, her voice breaking. Please, David. I love you. I love our family. Don't throw it all away. Don't throw it all away? I repeated, anger flaring up again. I'm not the one who threw it away, Olivia. You did that all on your own. I know, she cried, her tears falling faster now. I know, and I hate myself for it. But please, David, don't give up on us. I turned to look at her then, really look at her. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes swollen and red. She looked broken, desperate, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then the image of her in that hotel room flashed in my mind again, and the anger surged back with a vengeance. How can I not give up on us? I asked, my voice cold. You gave up on us the moment you decided to cheat. She took another step toward me, reaching out as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting more distance between us. I can't even stand to look at you right now, I said, my voice shaking with the effort to keep my emotions in check. Her face crumpled at my words, and she covered her mouth with her hand to stifle a sob. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't change anything, I replied, my voice harsh. Sorry doesn't undo what you did. She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I know, she whispered. I know it doesn't. But I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Just, please don't leave. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. I felt like I was drowning, suffocating under the weight of everything that had happened. I wanted to lash out, to hurt her as much as she had hurt me, but I couldn't. All I could do was stand there, feeling the anger and the pain eat away at me. I need time, I finally said, my voice hollow. I need time to think. She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Take all the time you need, she whispered. Just, please, don't give up on us. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I turned away from her, walking toward the stairs that led to our bedroom. But when I reached the bottom step, I stopped. The thought of going to bed, of lying next to her after everything that had happened, was unbearable. Instead, I turned and headed to the guest room, the room that had been gathering dust for years. I didn't look back at her as I closed the door behind me. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My marriage, the life I had built with Olivia, was crumbling around me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me, and I lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling. The anger and pain were still there, simmering just below the surface, but there was something else now too, an overwhelming sense of loss. I had lost something today. Something I could never get back. And no matter what happened next, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The next few days passed in a blur. I barely left the guest room, only emerging when necessary to avoid arousing the kids' suspicion. Olivia tried to reach out to me, tried to talk, but I shut her down every time. I wasn't ready to have that conversation yet. Every time I saw her, all I could think about was her betrayal, the image of her with that man seared into my brain. It felt like my entire world had been ripped apart, and I was left standing in the rubble, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't know how to move forward, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't just let this slide. She had destroyed my trust, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. If she thought she could cheat on me and then cry her way back into my good graces, she had another thing coming. I was going to make sure she paid for what she did, in a way that she would never forget. I spent those days planning, thinking through every detail of what I was going to do. I needed to hurt her the way she had hurt me, but I didn't want to lose control again like I did at the hotel. This time, I needed to be cold, calculating. I had to be smart about this. I needed to strike at the thing she valued most, to make her feel the same betrayal and pain she had inflicted on me. The first step in my plan was to regain some control over my own life. I started small, taking back little things that she had taken over during our marriage. I reasserted my presence in the house, moving my things back into the master bedroom while she was out, forcing her to relocate to the guest room. It was a silent declaration of war, a way of telling her that I was no longer willing to share my space with her. She noticed the change immediately when she came home that evening. I was sitting in the living room, deliberately calm, as she walked in and saw her belongings piled neatly outside the guest room door. She looked at me, confusion and hurt in her eyes, but I didn't say anything. I just stared back at her, daring her to challenge me. She didn't. She picked up her things and retreated to the guest room without a word. I didn't stop there. I started taking back other parts of our life together, piece by piece. I went through our finances, pulling out of joint accounts and setting up my own. I canceled services and subscriptions that were in both our names, replacing them with one solely in mine. I was methodical, careful to leave no trace of what I was doing until it was too late for her to stop me. I didn't do anything illegal, but I made sure that I was in control of every aspect of our life that I could take back. Olivia didn't say much during this time. She was walking on eggshells, trying to gauge my mood, but I was giving her nothing. I kept my distance, speaking to her only when necessary and keeping my tone cold and detached. I could see the effect it was having on her, the way she would flinch every time I spoke, the way her eyes would well up with tears that she quickly wiped away. But I didn't care. I wanted her to feel the way I felt, powerless, isolated, and betrayed. But I wasn't done yet. The next part of my plan was a little more public. Olivia had always been the social one, the life of the party in our circle of friends. She loved being the center of attention, loved the admiration and respect she got from those around her. But that also meant she had a lot to lose if her perfect image was shattered. I started by planting seeds of doubt among our friends. I didn't outright accuse her of anything, no, that would have been too easy to dismiss as the ramblings of a bitter husband. Instead, I started with subtle comments, casual mentions of how distant Olivia had been lately, how she had been spending more time out of the house, how she seemed to be keeping secrets. I let them draw their own conclusions, all while maintaining an air of concerned confusion, as if I was just a loving husband worried about his wife's strange behavior. It didn't take long for the gossip to spread. I could see the shift in our friends' attitudes toward her, the sideways glances, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered the room. Olivia, oblivious to what I was doing, kept trying to win me back, all while her social standing slowly eroded beneath her. Then, I struck the final blow. I threw a party, a small gathering with just a few close friends, the kind we used to host all the time before everything went to hell. Olivia was surprised when I suggested it, but I could see the relief in her eyes. She thought this was me finally starting to forgive her, finally beginning to move on. She even dressed up for the occasion, wearing that little black dress she knew I liked, her makeup carefully done to hide the stress and exhaustion that had taken its toll on her over the past few days. The night started out normal enough. People arrived, we had drinks, chatted, laughed. Olivia was her usual charming self, trying to keep up the appearance that everything was fine. But I had planned for this moment, and I was ready to pull the rug out from under her. Halfway through the evening, I brought out a slideshow, pictures of family trips, holidays, the kids growing up. It was the kind of thing we used to do at these gatherings, sharing our life with our friends. Olivia sat beside me, smiling as the photos flashed on the screen, probably thinking that maybe things were going to be okay after all. And then, the pictures changed. I had managed to get into her phone a few days earlier, when she had left it unattended. I had found the photos, the ones she had taken with her lover. They weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. There was one of them at dinner, sitting close together, her hand resting on his arm. Another of them in the hotel room, smiling at the camera, oblivious to the betrayal those images represented. The last one, the one that hit hardest, was a close-up of them holding hands, her wedding ring in clear view. I had slipped those photos into the slideshow, timed to appear just as everyone was comfortable, just as they were reminiscing about the good times. The room went silent as the images flashed on the screen. Olivia's face drained of color as she realized what was happening, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. For a moment, no one said anything. The silence was deafening, the tension in the room so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could see the confusion, the shock on our friends' faces as they tried to process what they were seeing. "What the hell is this?" someone finally muttered, breaking the silence. I didn't respond. I just stared at Olivia, watching her crumble under the weight of her own betrayal. She turned to me, her eyes wide with horror and disbelief. "David, please," she whispered, but her voice was barely audible over the pounding in my ears. "Please what, Olivia?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached. "Please stop. Please forget. Please forgive." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head, unable to find the words. "This is the truth," I said, addressing the room, but my eyes never left hers. "The truth about who Olivia really is." "David, stop," she pleaded, her voice cracking with desperation. "Please, let's not do this here." But I wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not after everything she had done. I wanted her to feel exposed, humiliated, just like I had felt when I walked into that hotel room. "I think everyone here deserves to know," I continued, ignoring her protests. "You all deserve to know the truth about the woman you've been friends with, the woman who pretended to be loyal and loving, while she was sneaking around behind my back." "David, please," she sobbed, her tears flowing freely now, but I could see the anger in her eyes too, anger that I had taken control, that I had turned the tables on her. Our friends didn't know what to do. Some of them looked at the ground, others at the walls, anywhere but at us. The awkwardness was palpable, but no one left. They were all too stunned, too curious to see how this would play out. "You've all seen it now," I said, gesturing to the screen where the images still lingered. "The proof of what she's done. So don't come to me with your pity or your sympathy. Save that for Olivia." I turned off the slideshow, leaving the room in an uncomfortable silence. Olivia was a mess, her makeup smeared from her tears, her hands trembling as she tried to gather herself. "I think it's time for you to go," I said coldly, addressing the room. "The party's over." One by one, our friends began to file out, each one casting a glance at Olivia, some in disbelief, others in pity. She tried to say something, to explain, but her voice failed her, and all she could do was stand there, looking like a broken doll. When the last of them had gone, I turned to her, my expression hard. "Now you know how it feels, Olivia," I said, my voice low and filled with venom. "Now you know what it's like to be betrayed, to have your life turned upside down." She didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me, her face pale, her eyes empty. I could see the realization dawning on her, that she was no longer in control, that the power she thought she had over me was gone. "I'm not done with you yet," I said, my voice chillingly calm. "Not by a long shot." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her to stand alone in the ruins of what was once our life together. After the party, the house fell into a strained, uneasy silence. Olivia barely left the guest room, and when she did, she moved through the house like a ghost, hollow, listless. I could tell she was waiting, dreading what I might do next. I had turned our life into a battlefield, and she knew I wasn't finished yet. The thing is, neither was I. My anger toward her lover, the man who had crept into my life and destroyed my marriage, hadn't cooled. Beating him up at the hotel had been satisfying in the moment, but it wasn't enough. He was still out there, living his life as if nothing had happened, while I was left to pick up the pieces of the wreckage he had caused. No, a few bruises weren't nearly enough. I wanted him to suffer, to feel the same sense of loss, shame, and betrayal that he had helped to inflict on me. I knew I couldn't just go after him physically again, that would only lead to trouble for me. I needed to hit him where it really hurt, where he wouldn't see it coming. I needed to dismantle his life piece by piece, just like he had done to mine. The first thing I did was gather information. I still had the details I'd found in Olivia's phone, his name, his workplace, his habits. It didn't take long to find out more about him. The internet is a treasure trove for anyone willing to dig deep enough. I discovered that his name was Jason, that he worked in finance at a mid-sized firm downtown, and that he had a reputation for being a bit of a ladies' man. His social media was filled with pictures of him at bars, parties, surrounded by women. He clearly enjoyed being the center of attention, basking in the admiration of those around him. But what really caught my attention was the fact that he was engaged. His fiancée, a woman named Emily, was plastered all over his profiles, smiling, happy, completely oblivious to the fact that the man she was planning to marry was screwing another woman behind her back. I spent a few days formulating my plan, making sure I had all the pieces in place. I wasn't just going to destroy his relationship with Olivia, I was going to ruin his entire life. I started by anonymously mailing a package to Emily. Inside were printed screenshots of the photos I had taken from Olivia's phone, along with copies of the messages they had exchanged. I knew it was a low blow, but I didn't care. He had no qualms about destroying my marriage, so I had no problem doing the same to his. I knew that simply sending the evidence wouldn't be enough. If Emily was anything like I imagined, Jason would try to worm his way out of it, make excuses, deny everything. So, I decided to make sure there was no way he could talk his way out of this. I made sure that Emily received the package on a Friday, just before the weekend, when Jason wouldn't be able to escape the fallout at work. The next part of my plan was more complicated, but equally necessary. I needed to hit him professionally, to ensure that his career took as much of a nosedive as his personal life. I called his firm, pretending to be a concerned client who had received some disturbing information about one of their employees. I hinted at Jason's behavior, suggesting that he was using company time and resources for his personal escapades. I didn't reveal too much, just enough to make them start asking questions internally. I knew that in a cutthroat industry like finance, even the slightest hint of scandal could be devastating. To really drive the point home, I made sure to contact a few of their biggest clients anonymously, spreading rumors about Jason's unprofessional behavior. I knew that in his world, reputation was everything, and the mere suggestion of impropriety could be enough to get the ball rolling. I then created a fake email account and sent an anonymous tip to his HR department, detailing his affair with Olivia and suggesting that he had been conducting his personal business during work hours, using company resources. I attached some of the same photos I had sent to Emily, making it clear that his actions weren't just a personal issue, they were a professional liability. After that, it was just a matter of sitting back and waiting for the fallout. I knew it wouldn't take long. I had done my research, I knew how these things worked. In a company like his, rumors spread fast, and once they took root, they were almost impossible to stop. The first sign that things were starting to unravel came about a week later. I was sitting in the living room, pretending to watch TV, when Olivia's phone rang. She had left it on the coffee table while she was in the kitchen, and the caller ID flashed Jason's name. I didn't answer, but I watched as the call went to voicemail, and then as the phone buzzed with a series of frantic text messages. I could only imagine what he was saying, probably trying to figure out if she had anything to do with the chaos that was about to hit him. But I knew she hadn't spoken to him since the night I caught them together. She was too scared, too ashamed to face him. I let the phone buzz until it stopped, then quietly deleted the messages before Olivia could see them. I didn't want her to know what I was up to, not yet. This was between me and Jason, and I wanted to make sure he felt every ounce of the pressure I was putting on him. The next day, I got confirmation that my plan was working. I had been keeping tabs on his firm, monitoring their social media and news mentions. That afternoon, I saw a post from someone who worked there, a vague comment about drama in the office and how someone had been called into HR. I knew it had to be Jason. The company was too professional to air their dirty laundry publicly, but these things had a way of leaking out. I could imagine the scene, Jason being pulled into a meeting, his bosses grilling him about the rumors, about the photos, about his inappropriate behavior. That evening, Olivia came to me, looking more lost than ever. She had been crying again, her eyes red and swollen. I could tell she wanted to talk, but I wasn't in the mood to offer her any comfort. "David," she started, her voice shaky. I think something's going on with Jason. He's been calling me non-stop, but I haven't answered. I don't know what to do." I just looked at her, my expression blank. "Why should I care?" I asked coldly. "He's your problem, not mine." Her lip trembled, and she nodded, as if she had expected my response. I don't know what's happening. He sounds desperate." "Maybe he's finally realizing what a mistake he made," I said, my tone icy. "Maybe he's starting to feel the consequences of his actions." She didn't say anything to that. She just stared at me, the realization that I might have had something to do with it slowly dawning on her. But she didn't ask. She was too afraid of the answer. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. Olivia was a nervous wreck, constantly checking her phone, jumping at every little noise. I could tell she was worried about Jason, but she didn't dare reach out to him. I could see the guilt eating away at her, the fear that everything was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Then, it all came crashing down. I knew it would, eventually. The day after I received confirmation of his HR meeting, Emily called off the engagement. The news spread quickly in their social circle, everyone knew they had been planning a big wedding, and suddenly it was off. I knew from my sources that Emily had confronted Jason with the photos, and when he tried to deny it, she threw the evidence in his face. She wasn't the type to forgive and forget, and I knew that once she was done with him, she would make sure everyone knew what kind of man he really was. But that wasn't the end of it. Jason was suspended from work pending an investigation, and the whispers about his affair with Olivia grew louder. The clients I had contacted started pulling their accounts, citing concerns about his unprofessional conduct. The firm couldn't afford the bad press, and before long, Jason was let go. Fired. His career, his reputation, his personal life, everything crumbled in the span of a few short weeks. And I watched it all happen, every step of the way. Olivia noticed, of course. She tried to reach out to Jason again, maybe to offer some sort of support, but by then, he had blocked her number. He had probably realized that she was the root of all his problems, that being with her had cost him everything. He wanted nothing more to do with her, and for that, I was glad. She deserved to feel that rejection, to know that the man she had betrayed me for was no longer interested in her. One evening, I came home to find her sitting in the dark, staring at her phone. She looked up at me as I entered, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and sorrow. "Did you do this?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. "Did you ruin his life?" I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. "I just made sure he got what he deserved," I replied evenly. "What did you expect, Olivia? That you could destroy our marriage and there would be no consequences?" Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I didn't feel any sympathy. She had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. "I never wanted this," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt." "But people did get hurt, Olivia," I said, my tone harsh. "I got hurt. Our family got hurt. And now, he's paying the price for what he did. You both are." She didn't say anything, just sat there, looking lost and broken. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of pity for her, but I quickly pushed it away. This was the path she had chosen, and now she had to live with the consequences. As I walked away, leaving her alone in the dark, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. Jason's life was in ruins, and Olivia's world was crumbling around her. I had taken back control, and now, they were both paying the price. I wasn't done yet, but for now, I could rest easy knowing that the man who had destroyed my marriage was finally getting what he deserved. The house was quieter than it had ever been. The kids were at school, and Olivia was somewhere inside, probably hiding in the guest room again. I had been putting off the inevitable for days, knowing that the conversation we needed to have would be one of the hardest in my life. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. We couldn't keep living in this limbo, circling each other like two wounded animals, pretending that the wounds we had inflicted on each other could somehow be healed. I found Olivia in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea in front of her. She looked tired, worn down by the events of the past few weeks. Her once vibrant energy had dimmed, replaced by a sort of quiet resignation. She glanced up when I entered, her eyes briefly meeting mine before she looked away, staring down at her hands wrapped around the mug. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. She nodded, not saying anything, just waiting for me to continue. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she braced herself for whatever was coming next. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her, taking a moment to gather my thoughts. "Olivia," I began, keeping my voice as steady as I could, "we can't keep going on like this. It's not good for us, and it's not good for the kids. We need to talk about what happens next." She swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the mug. "You mean, divorce," she said softly, the word hanging heavy in the air between us. I nodded slowly. "Yeah. I think it's the best option for both of us. We can't go back to the way things were, and staying together for the sake of appearances isn't fair to anyone. Especially the kids." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "I know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know you're right. I've been thinking about it too, but I just didn't want to be the one to bring it up." "I understand," I said quietly. "This isn't easy for either of us. But I think it's the only way we can move forward." She nodded again, her gaze still fixed on the mug in her hands. "What about the kids?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They need stability. They need to know that they're loved and that this isn't their fault." "They'll stay with you," I said firmly, meeting her eyes. "I won't fight you on that. You're a good mother, Olivia, despite everything that's happened between us. The kids need you, and I won't take them away from you." Her eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. "You really mean that?" she asked, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes," I replied without hesitation. "I'll still be in their lives, of course. I'll see them as much as I can, and we'll figure out a visitation schedule that works for everyone. But they need to stay here, in the house they've grown up in, with you. It's what's best for them." She finally looked up at me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I know I don't deserve your kindness after everything I've done, but, thank you." "This isn't about punishing you, Olivia," I said, my tone softening. "It's about doing what's right for the kids. They're the most important thing in all of this." She nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I know," she said again, her voice trembling. I never wanted it to end like this. I never wanted to hurt you, David." "I know," I said, though it was hard to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "But we can't change what's happened. We can only try to make the best of what comes next." For a long moment, we sat in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. The weight of the conversation hung heavy between us, the reality of our situation finally sinking in. This was it. The end of our marriage. The end of everything we had built together over the years. And yet, there was a strange sense of relief in finally acknowledging it, in finally making the decision to move on. "I'll talk to a lawyer," I said after a while, breaking the silence. "We'll do this as amicably as possible. No fights, no drama. Just a clean break." She nodded, her expression resigned. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do the same. We'll tell the kids together," I added, the thought of that conversation making my stomach turn. "They need to hear it from both of us." Her eyes filled with fresh tears at the mention of the kids, and she nodded again. "I'm so sorry, David," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." I looked at her, feeling a strange mix of anger and sadness. I was angry at what she had done, at the way she had destroyed our marriage, but I was also sad for what we had lost, for the life we had built together that was now crumbling to dust. "Me too," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "But it's too late for apologies now. We just have to focus on moving forward, for the kids' sake." She nodded, biting her lip to keep from sobbing. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this as easy as possible for them," she promised. "I know I've made mistakes, but I love them more than anything." "I know you do," I said softly. "And I know they love you too. We'll get through this, Olivia. Somehow, we'll get through this." She wiped her tears again, taking a deep, shaky breath. Do you hate me, David?" she asked hesitantly, her voice barely audible. I was quiet for a long time, considering her question. "I don't know," I admitted finally. "I'm angry, yes. Hurt. Betrayed. But hate? No. I don't hate you, Olivia. I don't think I ever could." She closed her eyes, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," she whispered again, her voice filled with regret. I didn't respond. There was nothing more to say. The damage was done, and all we could do now was try to pick up the pieces and move on. As I sat there, watching her cry, I felt a strange sense of closure. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with challenges, but at least we had made the first step. We had acknowledged the end, and now, we could begin the process of letting go. Eventually, Olivia wiped her tears and took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "We should start talking to the kids about this soon," she said, her voice steadier now, though still tinged with sadness. "They deserve to know what's going on." "Agreed," I said, my voice firm. "We'll do it together. They need to see that, even though we're not staying married, we're still going to be a family." She nodded, her expression resolute. We'll make sure they know that they're loved, no matter what. We sat in silence for a while longer, the gravity of our decision settling in. Finally, I stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. I'll start looking into lawyers tomorrow, I said, turning toward the door. David, she called softly as I reached the doorway. I paused, turning back to face her. Yes? I just want you to know that, despite everything, I really did love you, she whispered, her voice filled with sorrow. I still do. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. I looked at her for a long moment, my emotions conflicted. I loved you too, Olivia, I said quietly. But love isn't always enough. And with that, I left the kitchen, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The decision had been made. The divorce was inevitable. But as I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a deep, aching sadness for what could have been, for the life we had lost. But it was time to move forward, to build something new from the ashes of what had once been. For the kids, for myself, and maybe, one day, for Olivia too. The days following our conversation about divorce were a blur of legal consultations, quiet evenings with the kids, and the constant hum of tension that filled the house. It was as if we were living in a strange, liminal space, no longer a married couple, but not yet fully separated. Every interaction with Olivia was tinged with the knowledge that we were heading toward the end, that everything we had built was unraveling one piece at a time. We hadn't told the kids yet. We agreed to wait until the legal details were sorted out, until we knew exactly what to say. I dreaded that conversation more than anything. The thought of seeing the confusion, the hurt, in their eyes when we told them that Mommy and Daddy were splitting up was almost too much to bear. But we couldn't delay it forever. The longer we waited, the worse it would be. One evening, a few days after our conversation in the kitchen, I was sitting in the living room, absently flipping through TV channels without really watching anything. The kids were asleep, and the house was quiet, too quiet. Olivia had been in the guest room most of the day, leaving me to handle dinner and bedtime on my own. I didn't mind. It was better than trying to navigate the awkwardness between us. But then I heard the soft creak of the guest room door opening, followed by the sound of Olivia's footsteps as she made her way down the hall. I didn't look up as she entered the living room, but I could feel her presence as she stood there for a moment, hesitating. David, she said quietly, her voice breaking the silence. I turned my head slightly, acknowledging her without saying anything. She took that as an invitation to sit down on the couch across from me, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. We need to talk about the kids, she said, her voice trembling slightly. About how we're going to tell them. I nodded, feeling a heavy weight settle in my chest. Yeah, I've been thinking about that too, I admitted. We need to be on the same page when we tell them. They need to hear the same message from both of us. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I don't want them to feel like they're losing their family, she said softly. They're going to be devastated, and I don't want them to think it's their fault. They won't, I assured her. We'll make sure they know that this has nothing to do with them, that it's between us. And we'll make sure they know that we both still love them, no matter what. She looked up at me then, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I'm scared, David, she whispered. I'm scared of how this is going to affect them. They're so young, and they don't understand what's happening. I know, I said, my voice gentle. But we'll get through it. We'll be there for them every step of the way, and we'll make sure they know they're not losing us. She nodded, biting her lip as she tried to keep her emotions in check. I hate that it's come to this, she said after a moment, her voice thick with regret. I hate that I've destroyed our family. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me wanted to tell her that she hadn't destroyed everything, that we could still be a family even if we weren't together. But another part of me, the part that was still hurt and angry, wanted to remind her that she had made her choices, and this was the consequence. Instead, I stayed silent, letting her sit with her own guilt. There was nothing I could say that would make this easier for either of us. We should tell them this weekend, I said finally, breaking the silence. We can sit them down together and explain everything. We'll keep it simple, just enough for them to understand without overwhelming them. Okay, she agreed quietly. This weekend. We lapsed into silence again, the weight of our decision pressing down on us. I could see the exhaustion in her face, the strain of the past few weeks taking its toll on both of us. We were two people trapped in a situation we never imagined we'd be in, trying to navigate the wreckage of our lives without completely falling apart. I've been thinking, Olivia said after a while, her voice hesitant. About the house. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but I think it would be best if I stayed here with the kids. They need stability, and I don't want to uproot them any more than we already are. I nodded, having expected this. I agree, I said. I don't want to disrupt their lives any more than necessary. I'll move out once we finalize everything. Where will you go? She asked, her voice soft. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. I'll find a place close by, somewhere that's convenient for the kids to visit. I'll figure it out. She nodded, a look of relief passing over her face. Thank you, she whispered. I know this is hard, but thank you for not making it harder. It's for the kids, I said simply. They deserve as much normalcy as we can give them. The conversation drifted after that, neither of us having much else to say. We were both exhausted, emotionally drained from everything that had happened. After a while, Olivia excused herself and went back to the guest room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The rest of the week passed in a haze of routine and preparation. I spoke with my lawyer, making sure that everything was in order for the divorce proceedings. We agreed to keep it as amicable as possible, avoiding any unnecessary conflict or drama. Olivia had done the same, and by Friday, we had a rough outline of how the separation would proceed. But the hardest part was yet to come. On Saturday morning, we sat the kids down in the living room, the two of us side by side on the couch, trying to project a united front. I could see the confusion on their faces as they looked from me to Olivia, sensing that something serious was about to happen. Mommy and Daddy need to talk to you, I began, my voice as calm as I could manage. We have something important to tell you, and we want you to know that we love you both very much. They both nodded, their wide eyes filled with concern. I felt my heart break a little more as I saw the fear in their expressions. Sometimes, Olivia continued, picking up where I left off, adults have problems that they can't fix, even when they love each other. And sometimes, those problems mean that they can't stay together the way they used to. The kids exchanged nervous glances, their little faces scrunching up in confusion. Our daughter, the older of the two, spoke first. Are you and Daddy getting a divorce? She asked, her voice trembling. Olivia and I both nodded, the weight of that word settling over the room. Yes, sweetheart, I said gently. Mommy and Daddy have decided that it's best if we don't live together anymore. But that doesn't mean we don't love you, or that we're not still a family. Why? Our son asked, his voice small and scared. Why can't you stay together? It's hard to explain, Olivia said, her voice thick with emotion. But sometimes, even when people love each other, they have to live apart to be happy. It's not your fault, and it doesn't change how much we love you. I could see the tears welling up in their eyes, and it took everything in me not to break down in front of them. I wanted to pull them into my arms, to promise them that everything would be okay, but I knew that nothing I could say would take away the pain they were feeling. We're still going to be here for you, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. You'll still see both of us, and we'll still do things together as a family. But Mommy will stay here in the house with you, and I'll find a new place to live close by. Will we still see you? Our daughter asked, her voice shaky. Of course, I assured her. You can come visit me whenever you want, and we'll have special days together, just the three of us. I'll always be here for you. They both nodded, tears streaming down their cheeks. Olivia reached out and pulled them into her arms, and I wrapped my arms around all three of them, trying to provide what little comfort I could. We sat like that for a long time, the weight of the decision we had made pressing down on us all. Eventually, the kids' tears began to subside, and they clung to us, seeking reassurance that their world wasn't completely falling apart. We spent the rest of the day together, trying to keep things as normal as possible, but the atmosphere was heavy with sadness. The reality of what was happening was sinking in, and I knew that it would take time for all of us to adjust. That night, after the kids were in bed, Olivia and I sat in the living room, exhausted from the day's emotional toll. We didn't say much, just sat in silence, each of us lost in our own thoughts. "I never imagined it would end like this," Olivia said quietly, breaking the silence. "I thought we would be together forever." "So did I replied, my voice flat. "But life doesn't always turn out the way we expect." She nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "I just hope that, in time, we can both find some peace. For the kids' sake, and for ours." "Yeah," I said, not sure what else to say. The sadness in her voice mirrored the emptiness I felt inside, a hollow ache that wouldn't go away. We sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of the day settling over us. Eventually, Olivia stood up, saying she was going to bed. I nodded, watching as she walked down the hall to the guest room, leaving me alone in the living room. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the darkened TV screen, trying to process everything that had happened. The divorce was inevitable now, a final step in the long, painful journey that had brought us here. There was no going back, no undoing the choices we had made. But as much as it hurt, I knew that this was the right decision. We couldn't keep living in the shadow of betrayal, clinging to a marriage that had already crumbled. It was time to let go, to move forward, and to find a new path, separate, but still connected by the love we both had for our children. When I finally went to bed, I lay awake for a long time, listening to the quiet sounds of the house, feeling the emptiness that had settled over my life. But as I drifted off to sleep, I felt a flicker of something else, something that had been missing for a long time. It was the faintest glimmer of hope. Hope that, despite everything, we could find a way to move on. Hope that, in time, the wounds would heal, and we could both find happiness again, even if it wasn't together. It was a small thing, fragile and uncertain, but it was enough to keep me going. Because in the end, that's all we had left, the hope that tomorrow might be better than today. And that was a start.